Bit of a different one for you guys today. So we are actually getting on a flight to Georgia today. When I say we, obviously the crew's not with me right now, but me and a few of the other guys from Ecovision, we are going out to the manufacturer, and I'm sure Em will enlighten me on everything we're doing out there once we get there, but should be a fun trip. I don't know exactly what we're gonna do, but I will keep you guys updated. And eventually I will get you guys a bulking video, because the whole bulking has been vaulted conversation, we gotta talk about it. I mean, the concepts are pretty clear, I think, but hey, some people are still confused by it, so I'll clear up some misconceptions for you guys. There's a lot of things flying around that just aren't true right now. We will clear those up with science. I will catch you guys after the flight. You know what? We got some time, so let's do it right now. First thing we gotta answer when addressing this topic of is bulking vaulted is, what is maintenance, right? I'm seeing a lot of definitions getting thrown out there that just aren't what maintenance actually is. People think it's staying the same weight. People think that it's staying the same body fat. That's not what maintenance is. Maintenance is a state of the system where the energy within that system, the total energy within that system, stays the same, right? If you don't have that fundamental baseline, then none of the rest of this conversation matters. So it is the amount of energy contained within the overall system, i.e. your body. Now, if you want the overall energy of that system to increase, i.e. you gain tissue, you have to be in a surplus. So in order for you to go from being a baby to an adult, you have to be in a surplus, otherwise you would just die. You would not be able to keep up with the demands. As you try to grow, you'd die. You have to be in a surplus in order to continue to grow. Let's keep things very simple right now. You need to be in a surplus in order to add tissue onto the frame. Now, there are two types of tissues that you can add onto your frame. You can add muscle or you can add fat. And both of these are gonna have different caloric values for how much you add. So your fat, typically the easiest way to represent it for most people is somewhere around 3,500 calories per pound. I know there's nuance surrounding this, but that's typically how we represent it. And then muscle is like 800 or under 1,000, something like that. Now let's bring some concepts together. So if you are to go into a surplus, you are automatically going to gain some level of tissue, whether that's muscle or fat. Usually for most people, when they go into a surplus, they gain fat. Now, can they gain some lean tissue alongside that? Of course, but unless they are doing resistance training, they're probably not going to be gaining lean mass. That's why when somebody is 400 pounds, unless they're a strongman, a competitive strongman, you're pretty positive that that person is going to be 40, 50, 60, 70% body fat. I got lost on where we were because these guys just showed up, but I will have to look back through my footage, figure out where we were, and I will continue giving you this explanation later. See you in a bit. All right, we got to the Airbnb. Everybody else is asleep, so I get a chance to continue the video about bulking. Now we need to address why people say bulking is unnecessary. People say bulking is unnecessary because what they're referring to when they say bulking is indiscriminate caloric surpluses in order to put on muscle. At the time, you do not need to be in a surplus in order to build muscle. You need to have had a surplus at some point or another to have the energy available, but at the time of building muscle, you do not need to be in a surplus. Why is this? Because your body can repurpose your fat stores in order to build muscle. It doesn't need to be in a current surplus in order for you to build that muscle. And why is that? Because muscle building is signal dependent. So when we go into the gym, what are we trying to accomplish? Yeah! Right? We are trying to accomplish adequate mechanical tension. That is what we're after, is mechanical tension. And that is not something that needs you to be in a surplus in order for it to happen. So if it doesn't need you to be in a surplus in order for mechanical tension to happen, then it must be necessary that muscle building can happen in the absence of a current caloric surplus. That is the whole conversation. It's as simple as that. People are going to try and make it way more complicated. They're going to try and change the definitions of maintenance, surplus, everything else. But that is really what it comes down to. So what are the things that are necessary in order for you to be able to build muscle in a deficit or at maintenance, right? Everybody's talking about it as maintenance. This also applies to being in a deficit. You need three factors at play. You need solid training, you need solid nutrition, and you need solid sleep. Now, obviously, not having solid sleep is going to impact your training. So you can say chicken, egg, you can have these different conversations, but really all it comes down to is solid training, solid nutrition, and solid sleep. And all of these things are going to be impacted by your body fat levels. So if you are trying to stay at 6% body fat, yeah, this probably is not going to be for you. It's probably not going to happen. The reason that I have to bulk initially every single time is because I step on stage. When I step on stage, 6% body fat is not conducive to me trying to put on muscle mass. My hormones are out of whack, my sleep is terrible, my gym sessions are awful. I'm not gonna be able to maintain at 6% body fat and put on muscle. It's just not possible. Once I get up to a certain amount, my body gets more comfortable, it settles in. So right now I'm somewhere around like 15% body fat.
You're fatty.
Doesn't bother me.
Keep eating, fatty.
And some people might consider that to be too high, but for me, it's a very comfortable state where I feel good, my energy is solid, I sleep well, I feel really good at this state. And that is going to be the most important thing, right? It's going to be where you feel really comfortable, both mentally and physically, in order to be able to have the most solid gym sessions that you can have. Because if that is happening, you will continue to put on muscle. If you are able to continue progressively overloading, you will be able to put on muscle. If you have something that is impacting that, that is what's going to keep you from building muscle. It's not going to be the caloric surplus, at least not directly. Indirectly, the caloric surplus could be an issue. So if you are too lean, if your hormones are out of whack, if your sleep is awful, yes, that is going to be something that could hinder you from having the gym sessions that you need in order for you to continue building muscle. If that's not being hindered, then of course you can build muscle at maintenance calories. The thing that frustrates me about this conversation is a lot of people are going to take this way too far and are going to do what I tried to do for many years. When I first got into the fitness industry, I was a little bit, I was kind of trying to figure out my place. And because of that, I thought that the only way that I could reasonably stay relevant in the fitness industry was if I was shredded. Because I knew if I was a little bit more fluffy, that people didn't really notice my physique. I was in the 160s, but I was super lean, so people looked at my physique and said, oh, your physique is really good. And it was like, okay, but if I get up to 180, I know what happens.
Okay, I understand it now.
I get a little bit fluffy. I don't necessarily have the pop to my physique. And so because of that, I kept myself in a very negative state hormonally, sleep-wise, diet-wise, and that led to me having poor training sessions, which led to me, at the very bare minimum, maintaining muscle. I even started to lose muscle. I actually was atrophying quite rapidly when I tried to stay at these weights because I just couldn't have the hormonal balance at play when I was well under 10% body fat. So for me, bulking got me out of that cycle. Bulking got me out of that because finally I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna allow myself to eat more, and it allowed me to put on a lot more muscle. But that's not because of the fact of a large surplus. It was because of the fact that I finally got myself into a physically healthy state. And this is where people get confused, because a lot of people end up in the first position that I was in, where it's like they're trying at way too lean to just maintain their weight, which again is not maintenance, but they're just trying to maintain their weight. And then what happens is they bulk and then they put on muscle and they're like, well, that means bulking works. It's like, well, yes, for that circumstance, bulking worked, but that doesn't mean that you had to do a very large surplus in order to make that happen. Well, bulk worked for me, therefore bulk all circumstances. It just doesn't make sense. About every week, I have a conversation with at least one or two of my clients where they will say to me, hey, my weight's staying the same, or it's barely going up. And they're like, what do I do? I'm like, how are your gym sessions? Oh, they're fantastic. How's your sleep? Really good. How's your digestion? It's great. Like, okay. No need to change anything. And I think this is the problem, right? People are trying to artificially inflate the scale, so they're gaining far more fat than they need to in their off seasons. Or for some people, it's not even their off seasons.
Em, get out of my shot.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, this is very, very simplified down. When people say muscle building isn't energy dependent, that's not true. Muscle building is energy dependent. It's just not surplus dependent. So it needs to get energy from somewhere in order for muscle building to happen at some point. Might not be at that exact moment, but it does need it at some point. And this is where people are getting confused. They're like, well, how can you put on tissue without energy coming into the system? And it's like, you can't, but the energy could have already been on this system, right? So just to make it clear, you will need to be in a surplus at some point in order to build muscle. You can't be 135 pounds and 7% body fat and get yourself up to 160, 170, 180 pounds at 7% body fat. It doesn't work. You would need a surplus. The size of surpluses that people are doing are completely unnecessary because their ability to put on muscle is not nearly as fast as they think. So if you're putting on weight quite rapidly over time, you can almost guarantee that a good amount of that weight is fat. Simply put, but hey, I'm sure somebody's gonna take something I said out of context. Bulking has been vaulted. Muscle building is a slow process. And once you understand that, you will recognize that you do not need to be gaining weight at a very rapid rate. That should really be the thing that it comes down to. Like, you might think you're at maintenance, and then like 2 months later, you're like 2 pounds heavier. It's like, oh, well, I guess I wasn't at maintenance. Or maybe you were at maintenance and you just repurposed your fat. But that's the thing, right? People are like, well, you can't go from 150 to 200 and at maintenance. It's like, no, but you also don't need a massive surplus in order to make it happen if the majority of it is muscle, which in a lot of cases it won't be for most people. I feel like I'm rambling at this point, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. We are going to go to our manufacturer, get a bunch of stuff done. This video is sponsored by Echo. No, it's not actually sponsored by Echo. I'm just throwing that in there. Please do not think that this means that you don't have to gain weight, because if you are 150 pounds, you are absolutely going to have to gain weight. But that is not the definition of maintenance. By the way, I was speaking through concepts a little bit fast, so if I mixed up something, feel free to drop it in the comments, and if I did mess something up, I will address that. But I was talking freehand for most of it, so I might have mixed in together some concepts. We'll have to think about it. TNFO.